We live in San Francisco, Colorado, and San Francisco is located 10 miles southeast of the oldest town in Colorado, which is San Luis. So our little village is tucked at the foot of Culebra Peak.
We moved back over here from the city in 2003, and it's something that I always wanted to come back to, because when I left here as a kid, I left heartbroken, and I was kind of forced to go, and I didn't want to go, but I was only 12 years old, so I had no choice. But when we came back, we've been here ever since 2003 after I retired, and little town of San Francisco has always been part of my heart. I was born here in San Francisco in an Adobe home about 3 blocks from here that doesn't exist anymore. And we enjoy living here because it's a beautiful little town. It's quiet, and you don't hear all the rip-rap that you do in the cities. I'm actually a 7th generation. It goes back all the way to when Colorado was still part of Mexico. And at that time, the United States took over this region and became Colorado. My antepasados were living here already, and they were well established here. And they were given a choice to either stay here as Mexican Americans or go back to Mexico. And obviously the choice was they were already established here, they were living here, and they didn't want to pick up roots and go somewhere else. They had to build homes, and most of the homes that they built were made out of Adobe, and then they would get a lot of the lumber from the Sierra. We always call Sierra La Sierra. And they would get their vigas, they would get their latia, they would get their fencing. A lot of them even build the homes out of all wood or all varillas. But the majority of the homes were built out of adobes. One of the things that was very important at that time was to establish a way to distribute the water to the different villages around here. And the way they've done that is, to this day, I'm amazed as to how they studied the contour of the land and looked at every little piece of land that everybody owned and figured out exactly how to get the water from the main creek, which is San Francisco Creek, and then diverted it off the compuertas that they build to 2 main acequias, and then from there, there's a total of 5 acequias on the north side, and there's only one on the south side because the way that one runs, it runs straight from the east to the west, and it feeds all the properties to the south. The way the ranchitos are established here on the north side is they're more spread out, so because of that, they had to figure out a way of distributing the water to all those places, and the only way they could do that is to find out how to make the different ditches to get to different pieces of property. And it's just amazing how they engineered all of that, because they did it then, they did it once, and to this day, it still works the same. The only thing that some people had to build or make later on is what they call linderos. Linderos is also another ditch that runs from the main ditch. They go from the south to the north to reach the furthest pieces of land that are on the north side of the properties. They used to plant a lot of vegetables back in those days, and that's how they sustained their living, because they planted corn, they planted beans, they planted carrots, potatoes, cabbages, lettuce, calabacitas, you name it. They didn't have a place to store that during the winter. Like right now we have refrigerators and stuff like that. What they would do is one of 2 things. They would either build like a hole in the ground and then put all their vegetables in there and it, like in different compartments, and put like hay in between them, and then on the top they would cover it with a lid and a little bit of dirt, or they would make what they call a soterrano, which is like a little house that was built in the ground, anywhere from 10 feet wide to maybe 12 feet long. And then also they would put vigas over it, and then they would cover it with wood, with dirt. And then they would make an entrance, just one entrance. And inside they would put different kinds of shelves. So in the winter, or rather during the summer, my mom used to, or the people used to can a lot of the goods that they used to grow. And they would put them, in jars, and then they would store them in the soterranos. And another thing was stored in there was we would hunt deer or elk, or we would raise our own cows or pigs, and we would hang. There were hooks where we would hang the meat in there, and it would actually kind of almost freeze. So anytime we needed meat, my mom would send me down there and say, "Okay, go get me a can of this, or really jars of vegetables, whatever, and then get me so much meat." And I would down there and do that, and she would prepare some of the best meals ever. So that's basically how my antepasados and the people that lived in this region kind of made a living. That's how they lived here. Very primitive and very hard, under hard conditions, but they were able to survive because they had no choice.
I'm an urbanite, and I lived in Denver. Most of Denver at that time was Spanish speaking. However, my parents are from northern New Mexico. They live in Las Vegas, and outside of Las Vegas, in a canyon called Gallinas Canyon, or Chicken Canyon. And it's funny. My mom is from the very top of that canyon, which is stunningly beautiful. And my dad was at the base, from the base. So they met each other, and my dad married her. And my dad, because having been in World War II, he had opportunities that he didn't experience there. He had a chance to go overseas to fight in a war, make new friends, speak English a lot better. And when he got back, he found that his opportunities dried up because they no longer needed him. And most of the people that got back had their own ranches or farms to go to, and they didn't. So he came to the big city to look for work. And that's how I ended up there. However, we always maintained a tie to New Mexico. And I got tired of the noise. I was seeking a more quiet place. So I went to Trinidad State Junior College. And my family were happy with that because they figured that I would be better off going somewhere, a small place, because I had come from such a huge city. And Jose had come with his primos, or his cousins, and he had come to Trinidad. And actually, the night before he got to Trinidad, the guys just got together and they decided to do this, to go register for school, because they were veterans from the Vietnam War. And so Jose said, "I'll go with you guys. In fact, I'll even give you a lift. I'll take you in my car." So they all got together and came, and there were about 5 of them. And when they got to Trinidad, I met Jose in school, and our friends met our friends, and so we established some relationships there. And we've been together ever since. We've been together for like 43 years, huh?
43 years, yes.
Which brings me to the reason why we retired here. It was actually not an argument over where we're going to live when we retired, but my heart's desire was to live in New Mexico. And Jose wanted to be here, and I understand and I love this place. But what's neat is that there is no difference in culture. The same culture that's here is the same as in northern New Mexico. We even speak the same. We speak Manito talk. Also, the foods are very similar. And the customs or the ways and the nuances of life that we share are the same as in New Mexico. It's a sharing community. It may not be as prevalent as it used to be, and the old folks have a little bit of sadness about that. But because we're in an Acequia community, we share water, and we have a communal love of place, or una querencia. We have this deep, earnest feeling in our heart that this is where we belong. Inner city living in the 70s, we were in a transition. In 65 or 64, the civil rights movement happened, and our right to vote, imagine, just to vote, happened. My parents never voted because they never felt welcome to vote. You make different kinds of friends. They're friends whose families are from rural areas who have come to the big city. And so they've retained a lot of the values of the small town. But also because of discrimination, there's no housing. There's a lot of discrimination in work, voting, about 68 or 69. We had a student walkout from West High School. That was my school. And we marched to the state capitol. And what we were asking for was more minority teachers. We wanted more involvement in our own education. We wanted more involvement in the way things were going. If our brothers and our uncles and our friends who were called to the draft and they were young, they were barely 18 and they're being called back into war and they couldn't vote, that was a big issue. There's something about injustice. It's even ingrained here. In this community, we don't like injustice. And yet it's happening, and it happens. And now I realize it's just a reality of life. So the way to fight that, I thought, when I married Jose was, we would fight back like an old professor told us. You kids are so bright and so smart and so young and dumb. But if you would just get into the system and educate yourselves, then you can become part of the system where you can accomplish a change. And then from there, you break out. This trying to attack from the outside causes too much animosity. People are scared of you. You're never going to get anywhere. And maybe you will, but it may not be in the right way. And it won't last. Lasting change happens when you're able to make the change, or you get a seat at the table. So we consciously decided that we would provide the best education we could, and we did. So now our kids are in those positions where they make a change in people's lives. They are in positions to change things, and that really makes us feel good.
I went to school right here for the first 5 years of my life. Unfortunately, back in those days here, they didn't have very good teachers. They weren't well educated. They didn't really have the skills to teach young people how to be good students. So they're sad for me because I didn't learn very much. Very little, as a matter of fact. It was almost opposite of what she experienced in Denver. But I had no choice. And then another thing that we went through a lot here was a lot of child abuse, as far as physical child abuse. The teachers were very mean. The majority of the teachers were from here. One of the reasons why they took that approach is because they would always have the support of the parents, because discipline back in those days was very important and very harsh. And back in those days, parents didn't realize that the abuse that the children were going through. And most of the children during that era went through the same kind of experience. And then when we lost the Sierra back in 1960, my father and many families from here had no choice but to leave here because the Sierra was closed. The Sierra was really, we called it our La Sierra Madre, our mountain, mother mountain, because it provided food, you know, as far as hunting, fishing. On top of that, it provided everything else to build whatever we wanted to, corrales, houses, you name it. A lot of the people couldn't afford to stay here, so what they did is they sold a lot of what they had here, or what little they had, whichever, and went to the city to look for a job. And my father left here and went to Colorado Springs, and at that time they were building the Air Force Academy over there, and he got a job building the chapel at the Air Force Academy. And then about 6 months later, he moved all of us over there. And all of a sudden, I noticed the extreme difference in schooling over there compared to here. Teachers were really sweet and kind and understanding, and they were not abusive because, you know, they didn't allow that in the cities. And I started to learn how to speak better English. I started to learn how to do my math, my English, my geography, and stuff like that. And it was hard for me. It was really difficult for me because I wasn't prepared in my first 5 years to advance that quick at that particular time. I think back and I said to myself, I will never allow my kids to go through what I went through. And on top of that, I'm going to do my best to give them the best education that we can. And I give my wife, Juanita, almost all the credit when it comes to educating my kids, because I was at work most of the time. Sometimes I even worked 2 jobs for about 15 years, you know, because I had 5 little caritas looking at me, and I had to make sure that they were fed. And she would take them to the library all the time, and they come back home with books, you know, arms full of books, and they'd read them, and then they'd take them back to the library, and then we would take them to different functions that she would always find for us to participate with the children. Because when they don't get educated, it affects their whole life, and it determines what they do in life and how they do it.
My parents spoke Spanish at home. They didn't read and write very well, but my parents did well as far as teaching us how to speak Spanish. We speak a Spanish that we call Manito Spanish. Manito Spanish is a Spanish that's based around the 15th or 16th century. They even speak it here. We address one another as manitos or manitas, which to some people say, well, I'm not your brother and I'm not your sister. But in a community, you are my brother and you are my sister. And so we use that form of address more so in northern New Mexico than even southern Colorado, but it's still heard here. We pass it on to our children. Now, I have to admit at this point that I did not speak Spanish to my kids. Jose did. I just thought it was easier to talk in English, not thinking of the future. And he would tell me, hon, you have to think of the future. These kids have to speak Spanish because they're talking to my parents. And if my parents don't speak English, how are they going to communicate? We went to an all Spanish speaking church so that they got exposure there. Jose at home. I did when he kept reminding me, babe, you got to remember. Boy, that was hard for me. But they do. They learned to speak Spanish. They're all bilingual, all of them. And my grandkids speak Spanish.
To this day so far, they're maintaining it.
Yeah. But we used to remember, well, I don't know if you ever took a Spanish class, but I've taken a Spanish class
I never did.
In high school. Que coraje me daba. I would get so upset because most of the classes that we took Spanish because it was an easy A. And we always needed that for our GPA. But we had Spanish instructors who didn't understand Manito talk. They just didn't understand it. they'd say, that's not the proper way. For example, I would say, yo truje estas manzanas. Boom. That means I brought these apples. Yo truje estas manzanas. Well, we're using the wrong verb. Truje is not correct. It should be yo traje. But guess what? In Manito talk, traje means your clothes. It's what you wear. It says, qué lindo vestido, qué lindo traje tienes. What a beautiful dress or coat or jacket you have. So that's the confusion. So yo truje estas manzanas, I tell the teacher. And he would say, wrong. And I'd be like, how come it's wrong? Because you're using the wrong verb. It should be yo traje. And I tell him, pero el traje es nuestro vestido. You say vestido, we say traje. And he'd say, y ustedes, he'd condemn the whole class. He'd say, all of yous are just like, where do you learn this? And it turns out we were always speaking Spanish correctly. It is based in the 15th century. They used to think we were like backward people. And here we had a culture. My dad used to say que éramos gente del maíz. We are people of the corn. We were responsible for growing our own garden and corn. He meant that like Voltaire does in his book. Voltaire says that we should take care of our own backyard stuff, our own stuff, before we can start taking care of other stuff. And that's real basic. My dad had the same philosophy. He'd say, somos gente del maíz. We're people of the corn because we tend to the corn and beans or whatever. We had great pride for being from New Mexico. We were chileros because we eat a lot of chili. And he would say, well, in Santa Fe, they had a school in Santa Fe and they had business and it was a thriving community before those people came over on boats in Plymouth, you know, I don't want to say what it say, but esa gente, he said, they came from God knows where. And they land here and they trying to convince us that those are our forefathers. He says, no, mijita, I'm telling you the truth. Listen to your dad and your mother. Your gente has been here for over 500 years. They've just come from Mexico and they come through here and they established here. So he says, don't listen to all that. So I learned not to listen to that because it's not true. That history does not reflect ours. And it's the same here. I think it's hard on kids here because the language is different, our customs are different, our outlook in life is different.
Like I said, the people that established this place, they had it really difficult back in those days. But they were true troopers, like the saying goes. They never gave up. And that's how they actually established the history of this place here. You know, and they were able to carve out a good living considering the harsh conditions and the fact that they didn't have but a shovel and a pick, so to speak, compared to the machinery that came into being later on, or people that were able to afford a little tractor or a little baler or whatever. Everything was done by shovel and pick and fork. There were Medinas and Martinez's that founded this little community back in the days. Gabriel Medina was one of them.
He was your great-grandfather.
Grandfather, yeah. And there was another Gabriel Martinez also as well. And many of the old people, you know, that were here back in those days, they established this little place here. I even have an uncle. Well, he's like a great uncle. He used to live right across the street from us over here in an Adobe house. And he was the first child that was born here after the place was established. And I have a primo, Lupito Medina, that has actually the story of when he was born and what year he was born. So like I said, he was San Francisco was established before Colorado was Colorado. So that tells you how far back the history of this place goes.
Our water rights go here. The water rights are established in the late 1880s to 1905. 1905 was the last water right in this town was established, decreed, which was the Gabriel Medina. You have to think about the whole Culebra basin where we're fed with water for our acequias. I believe, and I haven't really counted them, but I believe we have the first 20 water rights in the whole state. How did these people in that late age, in a world of horse and buggy, travel over La Veta, go to Denver, and have no idea where they were going because they never traveled far, and they go to a bustling big city to file records in the state offices for water, to mark the water right? I just think of the energy that took, the daring that took, and the determination. Every little community around here, I know that they talked to each other, and they said to each other, you got to do this. If we have to protect our water. That's always been. We're benefiting from their sacrifice, which is why I guess we're as passionate about protecting the water as they were. When you're in Acequia, the parcels, the biggest parcel in our little area is Ruperto Gallegos, and his is about 100 acres.
More than that, he's got about 200 acres.
Now he's got 2.
Yeah.
He went up in the world.
Like 130.
Yeah, Lupito.
But those are the biggest parcels.
Those are the only 2 biggest parcels.
Those are anywhere from an acre to
what, 20
50 acres.
50 acres.
In this particular area of the Sierra, we have like 7 or 8 cañones. Okay, we start with with the Jaroso, the Cuates, el Torcido. This is el Derecho, and then we have the Vallejos, and then we have North and South Vallejo, and then we have Chama, and then we have El Pozo. And every one of these canyons have a river, that comes down, and from these rivers or these creeks, really they're creeks, large creeks, that's where we get our water from. Every cañon, for instance, it's been established for quite a while, a number of years now, has like their own commission. They have a secretary, a treasurer, and a presidente, and then you have a ditch rider, which is el mayordomo. We call it el mayordomo. He's the one that kind of manages the water under the commission's jurisdiction. And so every cañon takes care of their own water. However, the Acequia Association, where she's the secretary of, it's kind of like the umbrella where all these cañones and all these people work under. Like if we ever need assistance to learn how to manage our water better, or if we run into a problem of how to clean our ditches, or let's say there's a contention between property owners and there's a lawsuit or whatever. In this particular area, there isn't enough room for circles, so the little ranchitos stay as little ranchitos, but wherever there's plains or open areas, there's where they establish those wells. And as a result of them taking the water off the aquifer, they didn't realize just a few years ago that the ecosystem is all one system. The water system is all one system. For instance, we get rain, we get snow, we get granizo, hail, and that's what brings the water that goes down to the creeks and then down into the aquifers. When they started to take this water out of the aquifers, they started to deplete the water from these aquifers pretty fast. As a matter of fact, the round table in Alamosa, which deals with water and acequias and circles, are kind of putting the stops to them and telling them, you know what, you got to find a way to replenish this water. And how do they do that? Well, they got to have surface water, which is your creeks and your acequias. So what they're scrambling to do is buying property that has this kind of water rights, and then that's where they get this water from to kind of try to replenish what they're taking out of the aquifer. And it's not working very well, but it's a start. And another thing that the government has done was give some of those rancheros or farmers money to not farm. Okay, and they've taken advantage of that, but still, if you notice today, there's a glut of alfalfa and grass all over the place, especially here in this area, and just in Colorado per se, but in this area here, because of the mass production and the big advantage that big rancheros have with the water that they take out of the aquifers, they can grow up to 3 crops in one summer. And the summers here are only 90 to 100 days long. Versus us here, we get one of zacate or grass, and alfalfa, we get 2. And that's it. And that's irrigating it with only surface water. So it's flood irrigation is what it's called, instead of circle irrigation. So there's a big difference, not only in the way it's done, but in the amount of water that's used. The amount of water that's used by the circles is probably 100 times more than the water that's used in surface or in flood irrigation.
We're living a very simple land and water-based life. We're not hurting the environment. We've used methods that are over 200 years old. The water's still flowing. No chemicals, no pesticides. Those are not used here in the Culebra villages. In this acequia system, we have 1,062 acres. And those acreages are watered by 62 parciantes. A parciante is somebody with a water right who farms and waters off of the acequia. And the parciantes understand that they need to take care of their own ditch, so they clean it out just like they do in Antonito, and they work with their own little acequia. So
every cañon has a different system of doing it. Some of them, like us, we pay people that volunteer to clean the acequias, $50 a day, and that's it. Other people, like Vallejos, they all get together and do it, which I like that system better.
As a community.
There is a lot of work involved because you have to clean out a lot of the debris that's been there from the year before, a lot of weeds that grow into it, little trees, little shrubs, stuff like that. You have to cut a lot of that with a saw or an axe. But it's done once a year. In the bylaws that we have in every commission or every cañon, there's different stipulations of how they're supposed to clean them. And if they don't clean them, then they get fined, or they can even be denied the water to irrigate. Because the majority of the farmers are already older. They can't do a lot of that work anymore. The maintenance of the ditches within the farms aren't all that good. The water's not flowing like it should flow.
Because before, they used to have the whole community do it and make it a really fun day. Show your kids, your grandkids how to do that. And then everybody get together, eat a meal together.
Yeah, and that has kind of gone away.
That's what's sad. We're starting to see some changes. And one of the changes we're seeing is hemp farming. And that's starting in our particular area, so we know more about it than any others. There's no other hemp farming done in this area. But we have to replace the hay or the alfalfa. We have to, because it's just not profitable, all that work. We're all getting older, and we need to attract our kids to come back to the farm. So then, hemp farming may be an answer. And then, I hate to say, but marijuana is going to probably be one of the major issues. We're already having a clash over conservative traditional farmers and marijuana.
Well, one of the things that we're doing is trying to educate the younger people, the importance of it. However, because of the way the economy is over here, a lot of the kids that get out of high school, they have to go somewhere else to get a job or go to college and then get a job somewhere else. And there has been people that have done that and returned back over here, but not enough. And whoever does decide to come back, it's not going to be that many of them. So we don't know how long this Acequia system will continue to run, even though it's been running for over 200 years almost. It may not be around very much longer.